We will be getting started very shortly. Just need to set up the stream on Instagram. How the heck? How do I turn this around? Alright. Let's see right here. And then we're going to set it up right here. Yeah. Alright, so we just launched a stream on Instagram. We are going to give it a minute or so for people to hop into the stream. And then we'll get this show on the road. I hope everyone is having a decent week despite the boringness, the monotony. Alright, we got a decent amount of viewers, so let's go ahead and do this. So, as always, let me preface this by saying that what I mention in this stream right here is just our opinion. It's one of many philosophies on how we teach technique. There are many ways to teach technique, and many of those ways produce successful lifters. So just know this isn't us saying this is the quintessential way to lift, and people who teach the lifts in a different manner are wrong. On the contrary, again, many different paths to success with this. Alright, so on the docket today, we have 6 different lifts that people sent in for me to critique and go over. So let's dive right into this snatch right here, and we had this submitted from Sydney. So let's go ahead and play this through. Alright, so first let's point out what she did right on this. So I'll say I like how from the floor to the knees, her back angle stays pretty constant. What I mean by that is her hips and her shoulders in relation to one another. So when she starts pulling the bar from the floor and the bars at the knees, her back angle is pretty similar. Maybe her hips shot up a little, but I'm happy with that for the most part. And so this is something I very much like to see. So this is her power or jumping position right here. So the whole purpose of the pull is to get the bar into this position right here, to where you're getting ready. It almost looks like say if you took that barbell out of her hands, it looks like she's getting ready to jump. So it's a very similar motion with the body, but instead of her jumping up in the air, she's going to jump that barbell over her head. So it's a very good, very explosive position right there. Or a lot of potential to be explosive by being in this position. I like it a lot. And so then she extends, and look at how close that bar is to her body. Her body is pretty damn extended. Maybe a hint of a lean back, but it's a very good position right here for the bar to be in. with the bar right up against her hips. It's just brushing past. And so you see, just by her keeping the bar close as she extends, guess what? It's going to stay close in the turnover and as it goes overhead. So something that jumped out at me was once she receives the bar overhead, she has to sit in the bottom to stabilize, or she has to settle in the bottom a little. And so just watch this. I'm going to play at full speed. You see that right there. And so, the bar was kept close, so I was a little confused by that at first. But I don't think it's because the bar is going behind her so much as it looks like the bar is going sideways. Like if you catch that right there. Like just watch her hips right here. And it just looks like she's being pulled to the right. And so I would want to see her, a video from her, like directly from the front or directly behind, because that might be a sign that either she's sitting more on one side, is she's pulling unevenly, or she's just catching it unevenly, because you can even see in her feet, it looks like her left foot jumps to the right and her right foot jumps to the right. Like if you watch right here, it just looks like everything is pulling her to the right. So to kind of give you a visual, and pardon me if this doesn't come out clearly, because this is the first time I'm going to try to do this on a stream. So let's say alright, we'll just draw like a makeshift barbell right about here. So like right around here, here. Can we see that on the stream? Alright, so, and I'm not an artist, you'll see that very quickly. But say this is, I don't like that at all. Say if this is her right here, and let me change this real quick, because that is not cooperating with me. Where are we? Erg. Alright, so say this is her holding the bar overhead, like right around here. And so it just looks like the bar is pulling her to the right, is really what I was trying to say. Man, I messed that up. I can't figure out how to change the size of this. But yeah, anyway, so it just looks like the bar is pulling her to the right. And so my recommendation for you, Sydney, would be, if you have the chance, record yourself directly from in front or directly behind, and see if you're not like sitting more on one side in your pull, or see if you're just not catching it favoring one side more than the other. And the reason I noticed it is because I do the exact same thing. My right knee bothers me a lot, so when I get my starting position, I try to sit to the left when I pull, but guess what? When I catch the bar overhead, I end up jumping to the right anyway, and it just makes the knee that much worse. So yeah, just focus on that, and see if you can't make sense of it. But I think you either are pulling more in favoring one side, or you're just catching it in favoring one side, and they're kind of connected. But the other thing I noticed too, the very first movement that bar makes when you start pulling it is away from you. You see that from here to here. That bar is rolling away from you ever so slightly. And it looks like that bar is starting right up against your shins, like it's on your shins. So maybe just leave a tiny bit of space between your shin and the bar, and see if that helps the bar actually travel straight up or even in versus drifting away on that initial movement. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next video? I'll wait for about 30 seconds to give you guys time to type, and if not, we'll hop on to the next video. Alright, we'll go to the next video. So this next lift was sent to me by Spencer, and it looks like it's in a high school, and schools have been out for a while, so I'm guessing it's an older video. I hope it's an older video. Alright. So I'll be happy to talk about this video because I myself am a power jerker. But so let's look at the clean first. So right off the floor, let's take a look at his back angle. Right, I'm gonna try to draw it. Is it gonna work? Oh, that's why. Alright. So let's look at his back angle right off the floor right here. And that's not a good angle to be able to tell that up. But anyway, what I was going to try to show is right off the floor, it looks like his hips shoot up from there to there. So his hips are rising up quicker than his shoulders right there. He's just kind of yanking the bar off the floor. And as the bar is passing the knees, as you can see in this foot right here. Oh, no. God, this is sloppy. I'm going to have to learn a thing or two about this. What in the world? Why is it doing that? Anyway. Yeah, the sensitivity on this is messed up. Anyway, right here, you can see that he's sitting really far back on his heels. Look at his toes on that right foot. If the toes are coming up in the pull, that's a sign that an athlete is coming off balanced. So, based on the 2 points that I made, I would tell him to think about keeping his chest up off the floor and to think about driving through the middle of his feet. Keeping the chest up, that cue, will enable him to think about his hips and shoulders rising together. And driving through the middle of the feet would help him think about staying balanced during that pull. Because again, you see right there, toes want to come up. All right. So the bar bangs away from him when he extends. I can't really get a good frame of it right here, but you could see right here the bar is away from his body, but that could be a result of him being off balance in this pull right here. And so I would just have him first focus on trying to pull more balanced and see if the bar banging off of him doesn't kind of fix itself a little. So those first two things I just mentioned, oh, he caught that clean pretty nicely, but that would end up posing problems later on as he got heavier on just his clean, coming off balance and the hip shooting up. That would be a limiting factor in being able to clean more weight. And so let's look at this jerk right here. All right, so first let's go over the dip and drive. So when you dip down, you would like your knees to travel over the toes and then straighten back out. Watch what his knees do as he dips down. So his knees do go over his toes. That's good. That's what we want. But as he changes direction and starts to drive up, look at what happens right here. Look at that. This knee right here, look at what's happening. It's caving in. And so if the knees cave in, I find that tends to result in the bar kind of drifting forward as the athlete drives the bar up. So a favorite cue of mine is just to tell athletes, think about your knees staying over the toes on the dip and on the drive, or if their knees are caving in on the drive like this, telling the athlete to shove their knees out on the drive. Because if the knees, so he may feel like the knees are staying over the toes on the drive when in actuality they're caving in. So just knees out on the drive may help keep the knees over the toes on the drive. And so on this jerk right here, you would refer to this as like a starfish receiving position. You see it on heavy power cleans or power snatches for athletes to get lower underneath the bar. They could do two things. They can either squat down deeper or they can shoot their feet wider, which will also enable them to get lower and lower under the bar. But what do you guys think is more viable? Squatting down a little bit deeper or shooting your feet out wider? Well, obviously squatting down deeper. You're much more stable, and after a while, like, you're going to keep shooting your feet out wider and wider and wider until they can't go any further out. And it's not a very safe, it's a pretty precarious position to be in. So what I would tell him for the jerk is knees out on the drive and try to keep your feet more under you when you catch that bar overhead. Let me see if I can fix this. Is it going to work? No, it is not. But yeah, so what I would just tell him to try to think about is just to keep his feet under him on the receiving position. So look at where his feet are right here. I would want him to visualize his feet staying right here on the catch. Even if they don't actually, it's all right for them to, they probably should hop out a little. But you see right there, they're hopping out way too wide. So just try to keep your feet under you on the catch. Knees out on the dip and drive, feet under you on the catch. All right. Let's take the next minute or so. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment and ask about anything pertaining to the video. Yeah, it's for some people. My right foot has a mind of its own. Mine is kind of like that too. My right foot likes to shoot out a little bit. And yeah, it is very common for people to come off balanced in the pull. A lot of people hear the cue heels in the pull, and I think that's to reinforce for athletes to stay flat-footed, to not come onto their toes and come off balance. But it can pose a problem in itself if athletes take it too literally and are trying to pull really far back on their heels. How's the elbows? In what regard? Vano or Vano, what are you asking about the elbows? Just so I understand. How to stop chest moving forward to the jerk. So if the chest is dipping forward, sometimes it's a result of athletes trying to use their upper body to drive the bar up to get it overhead. So my coach, he would like to articulate that in a jerk, in the dip and drive, the upper body or the upper torso acts like a shelf. And so what he meant by that, it's like static. It's not moving. The upper body just serves as a purpose to hold the bar on your shoulders. And so it's the lower body that does the lifting. So maybe just try to think about it like that. If your chest is moving forward, maybe you're trying to get your upper body into play. Everything from the waist on up is just locked in. It's acting as a shelf. Let the lower body do the lifting. Vana, maybe send me a message later on. I'm a little bit confused by what you're asking still. I'm sorry, man. Alright, so the next video we are going to go over is sent by Jeanette. And if I'm not pronouncing that right, I apologize. I'm bad with names. So I think that was a pretty good lift. Alright, so one thing I do want to note, though, let me try to reset this real quick and see if I can't actually draw on this. Uh-oh. There we go. Yeah, this is what I want to close. And then this is... Alright, let's see if it's going to work this time. I don't know how to stop that. Ah, there we go. You're back in business. Alright, so what I wanted to draw attention to on this particular lift, so she does a lot of things right. I like her pull a lot. She does a lot of very good things. Why don't we go ahead and point out a couple of them? So look at her back angle right here, right before the bar comes off the floor. Alright? And so ideally you'd like to keep the back angle pretty constant. It should stay at about that same angle as she pulls the bar from the floor to the middle of her kneecap. So let's see how true of a job she does at doing that. I would say maybe right around here will be the closest we can get to the bar being at her knee. So let's see. Right here. So compare those two lines right there. That was her back angle before the bar came off the floor. That's her back angle as the bar is right at the knees. These lines are almost parallel to one another. That's kind of what you want right there. So when the bar comes up and in off the floor, it's not drifting away from her. I like that. And so she has a pretty good extension. Her body is pretty damn vertical. You could just draw a straight line right here. And so for athletes that have a very vertical extension, like so this is how I prefer for my athletes to extend, but it does predispose athletes to kind of hop forward a little. So pay attention to where her feet are right here. And can we see that on both streams? Yeah. All right, you guys can see the feet. Take notice of the feet right there. Take notice of that line. All right. And now watch what happens as she receives the bar. Hey, look. Now those toes are slightly in front of that line. When she was pulling, the toes were behind it. When she caught it, the toes went in front. What does that mean? She just jumped forward right there. That is not what you want. You do, in my opinion, it is okay for the lifters' feet to either stay in place. So say if we just drew a box right in here, it's okay for the athlete's feet to stay in place and just hop out, but stay within this box right here. And I am under the opinion that it's okay for the feet to even jump back a little bit right here, because the bar is in front of you. The machine, aka your body, that's applying force to the bar, is behind the bar. So it would make sense that if you're having to add some backwards force, that you might have to jump back a little. But if you're hopping forward, that's a sign something maybe happened. Either you came off balance, a bar was in front of you, and I don't see either of those things. So first I'll start off with my solution for this. How I would go about correcting this. I would tell her just to think about extending harder at the top. She hits some good positions, but if you're not putting enough force on the bar, even in these positions, then the bar is going to be left out a little bit in front, like so-called inadequate extension. So it isn't just hitting these positions, but it's how you're hitting these positions. So the harder and the quicker that she'd extend, the more power that she would be generating, and so maybe she wouldn't end up popping forward. So Jeanette, and again, I apologize if I'm butchering your name, if you're watching this, just think about extending harder at the top. Just getting a little bit of fire at the top of your pull, and I wonder if that would stop you from hopping forward. Or an old Indian trick that my coach would do, and I'm sure many other coaches would do, is to actually draw a line on the platform in front of your toes, and you line up your toes right behind this line anytime you perform a snatch, and the objective of after each rep is to stay behind the line. So maybe try that. And then we got a good few questions here, so I'm gonna take a peek at what you guys have to say. Thank you and good night. Let's see, where are we? I always have trouble with my starting position for snatch. Are there any cues you can provide to ensure that the starting position is correct? My hips are always either too high or too low. So that's going to be a bit of trial and error. And Shahana, you're going to have to correct me on how to pronounce your name. But I am going to go over your video at the end. I got it just in time. But it's going to be largely individual, but that's also going to take a little bit of you feeling out a start position that's comfortable for you. Because I could tell you, oh, well, the hips should be at this height. They should be at the level of the knees or slightly below. But while that may be true for some athletes, that may not be true for you or another athlete. So just something to think about, and we'll take a look at your video in a minute. I have a problem with being comfortable under heavier weights, 200 pounds, especially on the clean and jerk. I have 2 herniated discs, and I believe that's why. any suggestions on how to get more comfortable on getting more hip mobility, it would have to I would have to see what your receiving position looks like. Um, First and foremost, I'm not a medical professional, so these are just suggestions. But consult with a physical therapist or again an actual medical professional. But mobility for the Olympic lifts is, I think, mobility in general is very specific. In that, if you're trying to gain mobility, say to be able to perform a squat clean or be able to perform a front squat, let's say, the most direct way to be able to gain mobility in a front squat is by forcing your body or trying to get your body into the position of a front squat, of holding the barbell in a front rack, of sitting in the bottom of a squat while your upper body is holding a barbell in a front rack. Things like that, and if you can't get in those positions, trying to work the range of motion as well as you can do, and then just slowly just try to stretch out a little bit more and a little bit more, just right on the cusp of what you can do versus what you can't do, and just weaning your way to the position that you're trying to accomplish. So, but with that being said, I would be curious to see what your technique looks like for the clean, because I've worked with a good handful of athletes who thought that they had mobility issues and couldn't sit in the bottom of a front squat, but the bar was just out of place. So it felt like they didn't have the mobility, but no, the bar just wasn't in a good spot for them to receive it. But yeah, again, especially because you mentioned that you had herniated disc, I would strongly recommend actually consulting a medical professional. Because I just coach weightlifting, so that's, again, don't take that as some, hey, do this, but maybe that might help. All right, let's go on to the next video. And this was sent to me by Miss Abigail, so let's watch this video. She does our Voodoo Solution programming. And God, I have to give her props. She has made leaps and bounds of improvement in this last month. Let's watch it again. It's a hell of a snatch right there. So, all right. So, when she first started doing our programming, the two things that jumped out to me, I believe one of them was she used to be off balance in her pull. And so, let's see if we can't get this right here. Yeah. So just look at her feet now. Watch right here. And you guys tell me, is she coming off balance or is she staying balanced in this pull? I'd say that's pretty damn balanced. So she's already corrected that, and this looks like it's with probably a pretty good percentage on the snatch. I'd have to reference her max on the snatch, but she stays nice and balanced. She extends pretty well. Maybe could have stayed flat-footed a little bit longer. But the other thing was she wasn't moving her feet before. Her feet were staying in place when she was going from pulling the bar to catching it. Now her feet are jumping out. So look at that receiving position. Look at how upright she is. And she just pops right up out of the bottom of the overhead squat. So, Abigail, first off, I'm proud of you. That is a very well executed snatch. Now, if I were to be a stickler right now, I would tell her to maybe think about keeping her chest up off the floor a little bit more. And recall the back angle that we drew of Jeanette a couple of videos ago. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to compare Abigail's back angle from the floor to the knees right here. All right. So let's say, what do you think, guys? That's probably at about her knees. So we're going to draw back angle right. No, don't do that. Right here. And so you could see, look at how much the hips traveled. Compare this distance right here to how much the shoulders traveled. So, yep. So the hips traveled quicker, and they traveled more than the shoulders did. So, Abigail, what I would just tell you to think about is just to keep your chest up off the floor when you start pulling that bar. Or another way you could think about it is to lead the pull with the shoulders. Every inch that the bar comes off the ground, so say if we are starting right here, so every inch that this bar travels, so the bar is right here, the shoulders are right here. So let's say the bar traveled 2 inches right here, or 3 inches right here. The shoulders also need to travel 3 inches too. So you see right here, it may be about right here. The shoulders need to rise up as much as the bar does. So, or another way you could think about it. This is kind of a neat cue that I'd heard. Like, maybe pretend that there's a string attached to the back of your shirt, and that as you're coming off the floor, just almost like visualize or pretend there's like someone pulling the string up as you're coming off the floor, like pulling your shoulders up off the floor, just kind of having that feeling of feeling like your shoulders tugging up. And maybe that might help keep your shoulders up a little more off the floor. But again, that's just me being a stickler. You did a lot of things right, and you've made a lot of corrections. So very, very happy. Very, very happy. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next video? Yeah, of course, of course. I'm very happy with it. You're a very coachable person. I'll go ahead and move to the next video, and if in the next 30 seconds I see a question pop up, I will go over it. Alright, so this video is from Reagan, and I hope I'm... Alright, I have some interesting dancing in the background, but let's go over back angles again. And alright, so you guys go ahead and tell me what happens right here. Alright, we'll draw right here, and we will draw again right here. And I guess it wasn't as drastic as it looked, but yeah, I don't know. It's okay, that's what it was. So if you notice, her hips are a little bit lower when she's getting set, but once she actually starts pulling the bar off the ground, her hips kind of come up a little. But the bar still isn't off the ground yet, and it does stay pretty constant. That kind of fooled me a little, but like, look at that. Do that to that. Yeah, so okay, I take it back. But the bar, I can't see the bar in relation to her hips, but it looks like the bar is kicking away from her a little at the top of the pull. And I think this is a heavier clean attempt for her, but let's say if we just drew, and I'm going to try to draw a vertical line, but let's just try to draw a vertical line. That is not straight. And let's see where the bar moves in relation to this crooked line right here. So, alright, we can judge it more on where the bar is right here. The bar is drifted in, it's pretty close to her body. But then look, as she extended, the bar is kicked out away from her. Like you could see her shoulders right here, and the bar is like all the way out here. So maybe have her try to warm up on her cleans by performing a pull before she actually performs a clean off the floor, and just feeling the bar brush or to stay close to your body. And so again, I'm testing out this pin, so I'm trying out these illustrations. So say if we drew someone's leg right here and we have the bar right here, so the bar is going to make contact, but when it makes contact, you want the bar to just kind of brush past the hips as it's traveling overhead. So it's just going to kind of like lightly cruise past the hips as it makes contact. And what it looks like the bar is doing right here with her, instead of brushing, it looks like it's banging away. So it looks like the bar is coming straight into her hips and then popping away like this. You guys, can you kind of see the difference between that, which is banging, versus like say right here, the bar is right here, it's just brushing. So it's just maintaining a much straighter path. It's not like ricocheting or bouncing off of her. That's what I would tell her to think about. Try to get more of a brush. And so that's all I have to say about the clean. Let's take a look at the jerk. Her footwork has improved a lot. If you were to see her jerk a few weeks ago, this back knee would be completely locked out. So her back leg is pretty straight, but that back knee is now slightly unlocked. And her hips are more under the bar. When her back leg was locked out, her hips were maybe back here. So her split has improved a lot. What jumped out to me is her dip and drive. That's the one thing I would want her to focus on in the upcoming weeks. So in a dip and drive for the jerk, you would like the bar path to be pretty straight. Like I'd like say if I was telling an athlete to think about something to visualize, and I'm going to move this down a little actually, just so you guys can see this better. Right here. Yeah. So I like to tell athletes to think about when they dip, the bar should move straight down. So right here, the bar should move straight down. And so when they drive up, the bar should move straight up. So it's just like kind of this path. The yellow arrow is the dip. The blue arrow, and I could have chosen a better color, the blue arrow is a drive. And I just like to tell them to think about dipping straight down, driving straight up. Now, look at what the bar does when she dips down right here. So before she even dips, she cocks her hips back. You see that right there. Her hips are moving backwards. And then she starts dipping down. And now look. Look, the bar started right here before she was going to dip for the jerk. And now look at where it is at the bottom of the dip. She came forward. The bar traveled forward. So instead of this straight motion that I tried to draw, instead of that, the dip looked more like this. The dip came forward. So guess what? If you're dipping forward like this, well, when you drive the bar up, you're going to be driving it forward too. So then it's going to move about in this direction. So instead of going down and up, it's now going forward and then more forward. So based on what she's doing, it almost, it looks like she's starting with her knees locked out. If you look right here, and when your knees are locked out, you tend to have your weight shifted really far back. And so when you try to dip for the jerk, usually it's the hips that are unlocking first before the knees are. And I think that may be what's happening. So look, her hips move back and then her knees come forward. So I would tell her to, as she's set for the jerk, to try to get her knees just slightly unlocked. So rather than her leg being perfectly straight like this, maybe her leg could be like not necessarily bent, but the knees just being slightly unlocked as she set for the jerk, so that when she dips down, her knees can actually bend versus the hips bending and then the knees bending. So just something to think about next time, Reagan. Just try to get your knees slightly unlocked and then dip for the jerk and see if that helps. I think that may enable you to dip straight down versus rocking forward as you dip for the jerk. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next video? Alright, we will go on to the last video. It was sent to me right before we started the stream, so you guys will have to bear with me. And this is from, you're going to have to correct me. Is it Shahana or Shahana? Is it like hey or ha? Anyway, so she sent me a video, I believe, of a descending snatch. And this is the first time I've watched it, so bear with me a second. Hana, so Shahana. Okay. Thank you for enlightening me. Where are we? Alright, so let's take a look at this first snatch that you do right here. So you stay balanced when you lower the bar for the most part. Maybe I can't really see it from this angle, but I just notice slightly right here, more so your left foot, the foot away from the camera, look at the toes, and you can see the toes right there creeping up on that left foot more so, ever so slightly. So maybe you could be a little bit more balanced when you're lowering and coming up. But the bigger takeaway when I watched this video was your tempo, your pacing on this hang snatch. So a lot of times when people get to heavier hang snatches, weights that are pretty significant in relation to their 1 rep max, and just in general, like hang snatches, in my opinion, are harder because you're having to hold on to the bar. You have to stand up with the bar, you have to lower the bar, and then you snatch it, versus snatching off the floor, you're holding onto the bar for maybe a second. So the reason I mention that is because it looks like you're rushing through this hang snatch. You lower it down and then immediately come up. It just looks like you're just rushing through the whole process. So what I would recommend is to tell you to think about controlling lowering the bar a little bit more. The whole purpose of a hang snatch or any assistance exercise in general is to try and mimic a segment of the actual lift. And when you're rushing through that, when you're like lowering the bar down in a hang snatch and you're rushing through it, chances are you're not going to be in the same position. Chances are you're not going to be in a consistent position if you're rushing through anything. So just try to control it a little bit more when you're lowering the bar down, and that may help when you come up, just in general with the extension. That's really what I would just chalk it up to. It just looked like you got in a little bit too much of a hurry when you lowered that bar. Because the snatch off the floor, you received the bar pretty nicely. But it looked like a pretty good snatch. The one thing and you did hop forward a little. So it looks like the bar is dragging up your shins. Just based on how it's moving, it looks like the bar is dragging up your shins. And now you could be the one to tell me if you're feeling the bar drag up or not. But what kind of tells me, it looks like the bar kicks away from you a little. So whatever happens at the beginning of the lift, whatever direction this bar moves in, as soon as it comes off the floor, it sets the tone for the rest of the lift. So if that bar creeps away from you off the floor ever so slightly when you start pulling it off the floor, it's going to drift away from you even more throughout the pull. And so it does stay pretty close to you, but it looks like it's dragging up against your shins a little bit right there. So in general, something is causing you to hop forward right here. And with that start position, now say maybe your weightlifting coach is teaching you to drag the bar up your shins. That's one differing viewpoint coaches have, is should the bar contact you from the floor to the knees? Does that mean you're not using enough legs? If the bar is going to contact you, or if the bar is going to start right up against you, then you really got to try hard to use your legs off the floor. And so you don't want the bar dragging up the ankle or dragging up the knee. It should be a bit away from the shin. That varies from lifter to lifter. I personally teach my athletes to start with a bar maybe a centimeter or two away from the shins, because I find that facilitates the bar actually drifting in off the floor. But it looks like the bar does drift in with you as well. But to answer your question, I think it's all right for it to start pretty much right up against it, but I don't think it should feel like the bar is just dragging up your shin. Maybe it's almost lightly grazing it, but just using your legs just enough, the bar isn't quite dragging the knurling isn't quite dragging up your shins. My coach would always say that if you're bloodying your shins or scraping your shins, that's a sign that you're not getting your knees back. It's a sign that you're not using enough legs off the floor. Or maybe you could experiment with starting with just a tiny bit of space between the barbell and your shin, and seeing if that feels a little bit better, and seeing if that stops you from hopping forward when you actually receive this bar right there. So that might be worth trying. Does anyone have any questions? I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. And and then we will get on with the rest of our evening. Of course. I'm glad you sent that video before I started the stream. Let me scroll up. I think I saw a couple of questions that people asked that I didn't get to. Just a bunch of thumbs up. Alright, well, if no one has any questions, then I suppose that will be it for this stream. But thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. Looked like we had a handful more viewers this go around. If you have any suggestions at all, maybe I could start covering a topic or two on these streams. I'll be happy to do it. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And maybe in a week or two, we'll do another. I'll see. Alright, thanks, guys. Have a great evening.